Have you ever looked at someone and felt like they weren't telling the full truth? Not because you had proof, not because you caught them, just something felt strange. Maybe the story sounded too perfect. Maybe they reacted too quickly. Maybe their words and behavior didn't fully match. Hello, and welcome back to Bookworm. Today, we're diving into Never Be Lied to Again, a book that explores something everyone wants to understand. How can you tell when someone is lying? Because the truth is, most deception doesn't look dramatic. People don't suddenly become movie villains. They smile, they explain, they sound believable. But underneath that, the brain is under pressure, and pressure changes behavior, tiny shifts, small inconsistencies, moments most people completely miss. This book explains how deception leaks into communication in ways people rarely notice consciously. And once you understand those patterns, you start hearing conversations differently. Stay with me as we dive deeper, because after this video, you may never trust words alone again. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Okay, let's just jump right in. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to dive headfirst into the fascinating and honestly sometimes a little terrifying psychology behind how we can detect deceit. And we're going to learn how to do it in 5 minutes or less. Today, we're unpacking the invisible forces that are at play every single time someone tries to vigorously pull the wool over our eyes. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how you can spot it immediately. Look, we have all felt that completely undeniable gut instinct when something just doesn't add up, right? You know the feeling. Maybe it was a coworker who suddenly took credit for your idea in a meeting, or a salesperson pushing a deal that felt way too good to be true, or even a partner being strangely evasive about their weekend plans. You feel it in your stomach, but you just can't prove it. Well, the problem is that intuition alone is actually pretty unreliable unless you combine it with the observation of concrete patterns. So today, we're going to learn exactly how to validate that gut feeling by recognizing the undeniable, hardwired patterns of deception. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the reality of deception, then look at the stress of lying. After that, we'll get into reading the body's signals, move on to the words that reveal deceit, and finally, wrap up with your defense against manipulation. Now, we are pulling our insights directly from Dr. David J. Lieberman's incredibly authoritative and, frankly, genuinely fascinating work, Never Be Lied to Again. This isn't about wild guessing or playing mind reader. This is a highly structured psychological approach to decoding human behavior so you can get to the truth in literally any conversation. Let's start with part 1, the reality of deception and why we actually miss the truth. Because honestly, before we can go looking for the liar, we kind of have to look at ourselves. So Dr. Lieberman points out something crucial. It takes at least 2 people for a lie to be effective, one to offer it and one to believe it. And here's the tough pill to swallow. Our own truth blockers often make us the absolute easiest targets. Whether it's our own self-deception, guilt, or ego, or just this deep human desire to be liked and avoid conflict, these internal blockers totally blind us to the obvious evidence. Think about it. If you desperately don't want to see the truth, like ignoring the glaring signs of a bad business investment because it's just too painful to admit you were wrong, you simply won't see it. The absolute best lie detector always starts with a completely objective mind. And that brings us to part 2, the stress of lying and the actual internal mechanism of deceit. Okay, so what actually makes a lie detection possible? It all comes down to one thing: cognitive stress. When someone fabricates a lie out of thin air, it requires a massive, almost overwhelming amount of mental energy. It's like their brain's CPU is suddenly overheating. Because lying creates this immense cognitive load, the human body simply cannot perfectly conceal that psychological tension. Manipulative individuals might try their absolute hardest to appear believable, smoothing their voice and forcing a smile, but that internal tension inevitably leaks out. It spills over into involuntary physical and verbal symptoms that they can't control. Which perfectly transitions us into part 3, reading the body's signals. We're going to look at the physical symptoms of that psychological tension and see how this builds into an observable pattern you can spot anywhere. It's a cliche, but it's true. The body never lies. When someone is being deceptive, they become painfully, awkwardly aware of their own movements because their focus is suddenly completely internal. They're obsessing over how do I look right now and do I sound convincing? Their actions completely lose all spontaneity. Just like a machine running on a strict, poorly written program, everything about their physical presence becomes stiff, forced, and robotic. So here is your bodily catalog of clues to look out for. Notice how the deceiver suddenly tries to take up less physical space. They pull their arms and legs in, subconsciously trying to make themselves smaller to avoid detection. It's like a turtle retreating into its shell. They'll make little or no direct eye contact out of hidden guilt. You might see them touch their face or stroke their throat to self-soothe, but they'll rarely touch their chest with an open hand. You'll also see what's called a head shift, literally jerking or slowly pulling their head away from you when they answer. They actively avoid physical connection and move mechanically simply out of fear of getting caught. There is a stark, absolute difference in posture here. Think about it. If you are completely innocent and wrongfully accused of something, what do? You go on the offensive. You lean in, you point fingers, you take center stage because you are genuinely outraged. But a guilty person, they seek physical refuge. They slouch down, they angle their feet toward the nearest exit. Or, and this is a big one, they put physical objects between you and them. A coffee cup, a laptop, a chair. They are building a literal physical barricade to withdraw from the lie. Okay, moving into part 4. Words that reveal deceit. We've seen the physical leaks. Now let's tune our ears to the verbal and structural leaks. The actual structure of a sentence often betrays a liar's anxiety. When caught off guard, a liar will frequently reflect back the exact words of the accuser, just in the negative. Why do they do this? Because it is the fastest way to get an answer out of their mouth without having to actually think and formulate a new sentence. A truthful person gives a fast, spontaneous no, followed by an explanation. The liar gives a delayed, weirdly robotic echo. No, I did not take the file from your desk. Every single second feels like an eternity to a guilty brain, so they just echo you to fill the dead air. And what happens right after that denial? Well, innocent people are perfectly comfortable with silence. They answered your question, they're done. But a guilty person? They feel incredibly, overwhelmingly anxious when it goes quiet. They feel compelled to fill the gap. They start offering their story in dribs and drabs, adding more and more unprompted details until you verbally confirm that you believe them. Seriously, if you just stay completely silent after they answer, the liar will almost always keep talking, over-explaining, until they dig their own grave. These verbal tells expose a person desperately trying to compensate for their fragile evidence. You might see wildly exaggerated, theatrical outrage during a basic, low-stakes question. Or pay close attention to pronouns. Liars often drop I or we to subconsciously distance themselves from the lie, saying, the car got scratched instead of I scratched my car. You might encounter the mumbler, suddenly speaking softly with terrible grammar out of fear. Or they might offer abstract assurances, saying things like, come on, you know I'm an honest guy, instead of just giving you a direct fact. Also, definitely pay close attention to what's called the number zone. If you're interviewing a job applicant and they claim they managed a team of 6 for 6 years and increased revenue by 60%, your radar should absolutely go up. When a liar is under pressure trying to think on their feet and fabricate facts quickly, their brain gets lazy. It often unconsciously spits out numbers that are identical or multiples of one another just to keep the fake story straight. All right, let's move to our final section, your defense against manipulation. Now that we've diagnosed all the symptoms, let's equip you with the advanced toolkit to uncover the truth without ever needing to conduct a hostile movie-style interrogation. This sequence right here is incredibly powerful. Think of it as a conversational Jedi mind trick called the I just heard tactic. Here's the thing. Most people who lie confide in at least one other person. If you approach them and pretend you already know the truth, but, and this is key, you add a strong emotion to your bluff, like sympathy or surprise, you appear completely genuine. Say something like, I just heard about what happened with the account, and honestly, I'm just so sorry you were put in that position. The fact that you know is totally overshadowed by your emotional reaction to it. This forces the liar into a corner where they naturally validate your supposed knowledge because they feel understood, not attacked. You can completely flip the script by changing the risk-to-reward ratio for them. Start by assuming your suspicion is a fact. State 2 things you both know are undeniably true, and then switch from a threat to a super simple request. Let's say you suspect a vendor of hiding a delay. If you structure your confrontation to make the solution easy to accept, look, I know supply chains are a mess, and we both know this deadline is tight. Just let me know the real timelines so I can adjust my team. The deceiver realizes the dynamic has shifted. Suddenly, it becomes so much less painful to just give you the truth than to maintain the agonizing stress of the lie. You can even go a step further with a psychological technique called anchoring the truth. It sounds crazy, but just like Pavlov conditioned his dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell, you can unconsciously train a person to be honest with you. You do this by firing off a specific physical anchor, like a distinct nod or a certain hand gesture, during easy casual questions where you know they are telling the truth. Then, you repeat that exact same anchor when you pivot and ask the high-stakes question. You are literally psychologically linking their comfortable state of honesty to your physical cue. But you have to remember this fundamental rule. 90% of human decisions are based on emotion. If you want the truth, logic alone is not going to work. Yelling, "Tell me the truth, it's the logical thing to do," simply doesn't work. You must translate your request into an emotion-based benefit that includes an easy out for the liar. You have to make them feel that the conversation will be over, the pressure will release, and the past will stay in the past if they just come clean right now. You have to attach pleasure and relief to telling the truth and pain to keeping the lie. So, to protect yourself against manipulation going forward, here is your final, definitive checklist. First, you have to bypass your own internal truth blockers. Put your ego on the shelf, drop your guilt, and suspend your desire to just keep the peace. Ignore the exact words they are saying and objectively evaluate the underlying behavioral patterns we've discussed today. Look for that bizarre combination of physical stiffness and over-the-top verbal compensation. And if you still aren't sure, shift the stakes. Make the issues suddenly seem way more important to them and carefully, quietly measure how their genuine reaction changes. Having an awareness of these patterns drastically, fundamentally improves your perception of reality. Intuition is a great starting point, but observation is your shield. Take these tools into your everyday life, whether you're at work, in a tough negotiation, or just navigating your personal relationships. Observe the tension. Look for the leaks. The only question is, the very next time your gut tells you something is wrong, will you be the victim of the lie, or will you uncover the truth?
If there's one idea to take from this book, it's this. People often reveal dishonesty without realizing it. Never be lied to again shows that lying creates pressure, and pressure changes behavior. A pause, too much detail, a strange reaction, a defensive answer, small things, but meaningful things. The problem is, most people only listen to words, but communication is much bigger than words. Behavior matters, patterns matter, inconsistencies matter, and once you become aware of those signals, you stop blindly accepting everything at face value, not with paranoia, with observation, and that awareness can completely change how you understand people. If this made you rethink communication and deception, like the video, subscribe to Bookworm and stay observant. Because sometimes the truth appears in the smallest reactions.